Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump discussion. This week, we're going to hit one of the biggest issues most recruitment businesses face, irrespective of the market. Is motivation enough for them to succeed, especially if motivation enough for them to succeed in 2012? This week, I'm joined by Dave and Martin, as we were last week. Paul is got man flu, but he's out and about seeing clients, spreading his man flu across the universe. There we go. But he's out and about. He's there. And Heather's, as always, is working on HR issues. So leave her to be on those HR issues. This week, though, I think it's been a really interesting conversation, I think, about motivation, because at this time of year, lots of people are talking about, new goals, setting new targets and driving things. So I think we need to look at how we can sort of really drive that in a more positive way. So first question, what are the key reasons why traditional motivators like commission and incentives will fail to sustain long-term success, especially in the 2025 recruitment landscape?
Just on the basic assumption, I don't think they will fail, because I go into many recruitment firms, and one of the challenges for recruitment owners is, have I got the commission scheme right? Does it reward success? Am I paying too much? All of the things that we all know as recruitment owners are challenges, because I still think that money for recruiters, if we're talking about front of house recruiters, so when we talk about recruitment companies, we recognize we've got those motivated by cash and money, and we've got those who get paid a salary but maybe just an element of bonus. So there are two sides to this. But for the commission, I think if you get the commission scheme right and you have motivated people, then I think commission will drive success. It will drive motivation. But I also think a lot of the people that we've hired or we hire in the last 3 or 4 years post-COVID, their motivations for what they want out of work has changed. So they do want money, of course they do, but then there are other things like flexibility, the constant work from home, work from the office battle. That what we used to call duvet days now seem to be standard things. So I think it's understanding what it is that each of our people want, but not forgetting that we're there as leaders to run a business, and to run a business successfully, we've got to have profit and we've got to get that balance right. And I think that it's the balance question that that is quite important for recruitment owners. But I still think having a good scheme, having a fair scheme, is a big motivator. I think most of the people I speak to, I still have staff that are motivated by money, who are at the front of sales, the front of house, if you like, customer people.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think I was going to challenge the question and say, traditional methods like commission schemes aren't the reason that motivation is dropping. You have to have a good, healthy, competitive commission scheme to retain staff as much as attract new staff. But I think there's a real tension in the recruitment marketplace. If you look at LinkedIn, it almost feels like there's a battle coming between those that want flexibility and an emphasis on softer incentives, and recruitment businesses that still rightly want an ROI, productivity, and revenue. And it's getting that balance right that you talked about, Dave, that I think is key. But I think it's not as binary as that. I think that the decision that a business owner has to make is, what are we going to stand for? What do we want to recognise and reward in our business? And I say that as a side to commission schemes. So there are certain people who would value working from home, who would value a 9-day fortnight, or what, some of those more softer skills. And there are others that would really value development, training, growth, and cash. The key thing is what business do you want to be? And then the decision you have to make is, when you hire people aligned to that vision, so that you aren't constantly having that tension between, well, I've got to pay them high commission over here, but these people don't want to go out on a boozy weekend. They want to do something else. Understand what it is you want to be, and then hire and align people to that motivation, I think.
So I'm going to challenge you both on that, just because it's Wednesday, and I think we should be challenging on a Wednesday.
Martin, hold on. It says in my description you cannot be challenged by the host.
So the challenge is this: if everyone thinks cash is a motivator for a salesperson, I don't think that's actually right. You start to think about salary increases, commission payments, bonuses. they're all short-term motivators. So they work, and you're right in what you're saying, they do work, but they're short-term motivators. As soon as you get consistent performance from consultants, then their salary, their commission becomes the norm, because it's not going to fluctuate that much. So that commission and that salary just becomes the norm. And it's the same with an incentive. Just think about, you increase someone's salary, the first couple of weeks or first couple of months when they open the salary package, you say, oh, great, look at all the money I've got, etc. If the increase is enough. But after that, it just becomes the norm. And I think it's like trips and incentives like that. I remember going back to Adecco, it's a great motive when you first put those trips out, and everyone's motivated by them and they really want to get. But after a while, people suddenly start to realize, I've got no chance of qualifying for that. I've got no chance of qualifying for that. And I remember being at Adecco, and I think we worked out in the first quarter, 25%, we'd lost 25% of the people. They weren't interested in that. By the end of H1, 80% of the people were not interested in the incentive, because they knew they were never going to qualify, and it was the only usual 10% of the people that actually qualify. So I think as a motivator, commission, incentives, cash bonuses are great short-term drivers, but I don't think they're massive long-term drivers unless you're constantly growing and your commission gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think we've got to start to think there's other things, and the things you started to mention there, Martin, I think those are other things that are starting to drive certain people, because the cash incentive sometimes becomes the norm. And once it becomes the norm, it's not an incentive, it's expected. And that's a very different way of sort of looking at it. And I think we've looked at recruitment in a long way from our careers, that we put a good commission scheme, it brings people, it attracts people, and it incentivizes people. Of course it does. But does it do that constantly and motivate people through the whole of the year? I'm not sure it actually does.
I think there's two things there. First, noted that you agreed with some of what I said, so that challenge was mainly for Dave, so that's good. I'm happy with that. But I think that people need to feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves and that they're working towards something, so they feel that motivation. But commission schemes aren't just about motivation. They're also about the individual sharing in both the success and the challenges that the business have. So as a business owner, you need to make sure that you're not overpaying people if the business is struggling or challenged. And commission is a really good way of doing that. And it's a horrible phrase, but some people brutally say recruitment consultants are coin operated. You put a monetary value to the behavior you want to see, and they will demonstrate that behavior. And I think commission and reward, monetary reward, is a good way of showing individuals simply, I expect to see more of X and less of Y, and keeping them focused in that way.
I take that. That's an interesting point. But I also think for that coin operation type mentality, is that not then driven by the leader?
Yes,
because they're putting the coin in the slot. It's down to the recruitment consultant to pull the handle and get the money coming out the bottom.
Yeah.
So the incentives there. So it's going to be an interesting debate then, I think, today. I think I'm going to challenge Dave next, because obviously I'm going to say challenge Martin next, because I've not challenged him enough then obviously with that question. So the next question then is, how can the recruitment leaders go beyond monetary rewards to create a culture that inspires sustained performance and committed from their teams?
I'll come back to the last bit I said. Sorry, Dave, I'll jump in. Is you need to have a clear vision for your company and a clear purpose for your company, and make sure that individuals understand the bigger picture, because I'll come back to that point. Real motivation comes from feeling that you are part of something bigger than yourself, that working together as part of a team is going to achieve more than the sum of the parts. And I think that is a really key motivation. If I think back to my favorite times in recruitment, when I worked the hardest, it was because I felt as a group we were winning something, turning a big client in, hitting a company target, whatever it might be. And the key failure I see is during challenging times, owners and leaders don't want to put the figures up there because they might not be achieving those targets. But then all of a sudden you lose that group mentality that we are pulling together in one direction. So I would say one thing recruitment leaders can do is be really consistent and transparent about the expectations and goals for the year, and then progress against those goals weekly, monthly, quarterly, so that individuals can see the impact of their efforts as well.
Yeah, and to add to that, to me, the key difference for leaders in that long-term motivation is about character, and I mean the leader's character. Yeah. Are you transparent as a leader? You've maybe the group together have created the vision for the company, and you're always talking about the vision for the company, but are you talking about where those individuals in your recruitment business, where do they fit in? And I'm not just talking about sales, I'm talking about the people that collect the cash, I'm talking about marketing, I'm talking about HR, if you're big enough to have those people. Does everybody understand the journey that they're on? And as a leader, are you displaying the character that the people that are working for you buy into as best you can? And I would encourage you to manage some expectations. There are people who work in our businesses who have a job and that's what they want. They like the idea there's a good purpose and a good vision, but actually they just want a job. And they've got a job and they do fine at that job. And a lot of recruitment companies, they've got 20% of superstars, 60% are okay, and 20% aren't doing particularly well. There's been a bit of a debate in the last year where more, sadly, haven't done as well as we could have done. But people want the job, they're happy in the job, they're motivated to turn up and do what they need to do, but they're not going to set the world on fire. But a lot of those people are vital for our businesses. And as long as we're treating them right, and as long as leaders, we are transparent in how we lead them, that we understand, what can I learn from them? Do I respect them? Do they care about me? If as a leader, your staff can answer those questions positively, then I think you're on the right track for success.
It's interesting, Dave, on that comment, and I'm going to sort of look at it and things that I think it's the little things that start to motivate people and start to create culture. And I think it's those little things that managers bring. And I remember as a manager, and the only way I could sort of answer this question was go back to me as a manager in that time. I remember I had a small budget as a branch manager and regional manager that I could do what I like with. So rather than do the usual, take everyone to the pub and get everyone drunk, I looked at creating a culture of team and fun. So we set weekly incentives. So back to Martin's point of driving weekly different drivers and looking at different things. And I remember one where we let the team pick the criteria, but it was all performance based. And what the winner did was, if you won on a Friday, you got a 2-hour lunch. You also got £100 to go out and buy something in town. And the game was, you had to buy something that the rest of the business thought that was worth buying and was good fun. They would bring that back to the office. The team would then vote. If it was voted that it wasn't worth buying, you had to go back, return it, and then buy something else. So it was quite a really interesting challenge. But the team got really behind it and really loved it because it was an incentive. And the way we kept changing the criteria of the incentive meant that everybody had an opportunity to win the incentive in one week or another. So it wasn't going to the same people. And it meant the team were really invested in what was happening, and they were all invested on that Friday thing. Another thing, I think the biggest thing about going beyond monetary rewards, I think as a leader, it's about being present, especially in times like this. It's about showing up in the trenches every day.
Yeah.
It's being one of the team. It's creating sustained performance because you're the catalyst to that performance. You're the catalyst that's driving that. So it's knowing what really motivates and what really matters to your staff, because sometimes that motivation isn't enough. And I remember back in early 2000s, tech was going through a little bit of a hard time after the millennial bug, etc., and we recruited somebody into the business, new starter, and he started to bill, he started to become consistent, but his commission levels weren't big enough to really sort of put money into his pocket. And what we'd noticed every day since he'd started to work, he came to work in the same suit and the same pair of shoes every single day. The suit started to get a little bit shiny, his shoes had holes in and things like that. And it was one of those sort of things. I remember going out to lunch and tagged on with him and said, "Do you fancy coming to lunch, Richard?" "Yeah, let's go." "Okay, set a target this month, haven't we?" "Yeah." So if you hit your target, when you hit your target, so right, come with me then. Walked into TN Lewin, bought him a suit, bought him to church, bought him a pair of shoes out of my own cash. He went back and announced to the company, "I have just got a business winner's suit," and was really, really motivated. But the effect it had on the rest of the team was unbelievable. And we grew a massive culture of we're looking after each other, we're looking after things. And I found out later he was doing certain things because of his family, and therefore his money was going into that. So he couldn't afford to do that. And so just giving him that. And it was interesting, about 3 months after that, he started to earn some really good commission. He went out and bought a new suit for the next 2 months, a new pair of shoes. And every time he came to work, another business winner. And the whole operation appeared like that. So I think culture goes beyond that. And I think it's about you as a manager stepping up every single day, being present every single day, not just turning up, being present. And I think that's the bit that starts to create winning teams and that winning culture. And that BO goes beyond money. It's about finding things that make people feel that they are part of a team and feel part of something bigger than themselves, and that they are getting looked after. So we've got a question coming from Jamie. What do the panel think about the new, hang on, someone's just moved the panel down, thank you, Maria. The new NPS score. Now clients perceive an agency for its focus and investment into a particular sector, such that lead gen and client engagement is made easier for recruiters. Not too sure what that actually we're trying to get from that question. I'll read it again. What do the panel think about the new NPS scores, the Net Promoter Scores, and how clients perceive an agency for its focus and investment into particular sectors, such that lead gen and client engagement is made easy for the recruiter?
Is obviously, I can't speak directly. Is that about NPS scores and using things like lead gen helps the recruiter with their motivation because they're getting access to be able to sell more into the market? Maybe that's what that question is about.
So Jamie's just said yes, that's what it's about.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, well, anything that we can do as leaders of our businesses that help our consultants perform better, I'm for that. So things like NPS scores. I don't know. I don't know what you two think. Most of the companies I work with don't use NPS scores. It was a big thing, it felt like, a few years ago, but I don't know that it hasn't tailed off a bit. I may be completely wrong, but I know within the community of the people I'm working with, none of them use Net Promoter Scores, but one or two of them used to. They don't really do a big thing on Glassdoor and things like that. They're trying to promote the excellence of their brand, but they're not using NPS. But to answer that question, I think it's anything we can do to help our consultants drive performance, I think is really important. Because the question you were just talking about leadership, I think personal development is absolutely vital. So if as a leader, you can show that you are still learning, that you are going on events to learn about what's going on in the market. Maybe there's some government changes that are coming along and you understand them because you're finding out about them. You're reading certain books. You're passing books on to your staff that you've read, or podcasts you listen to, webinars you attend, whatever it is. If you're leading from the front and showing you're doing that, then the expectation from your management team and then the salespeople and then all the people who work for the businesses, actually, personal development is important to this company. And this is what I'm doing about it. That weaves into the culture, and it's like a really strong carpet. You know, the mat, the weave of it is so strong that it doesn't rip, it doesn't tear. And I think personal development is a huge motivator for people to get better, to show that they can do stuff. A bit like having a PT in training, or you could do that. I think you add that together with things like where you're helping them with Net Promoter Scores, or anywhere you can help them with business development, does help cement people more to the company.
I was speaking to a business owner this morning, and they said something that really resonated with me, which is the most important thing in a recruitment business is movement. You constantly have to be one step in front of the other, moving forwards, even in tough times, good times, and development and personal growth, I think, is key to that. But back to the NPS question, I had a business that we had FIFO instead of NPS, and we were struggling to get the team to really pay attention and ask the question of candidates and customers, can you give us a review? Until FIFO introduced a thing called TreeFo, and for every review you got from a customer, they planted a tree. And that really resonated with the business. All of a sudden, they were asking candidates and customers for reviews of their service and explaining that not only did it help us to understand our business, but it was good for ESG as well. And all of a sudden, the business just unified behind this. And we found our scores improve because we were asking customers and they were thinking we cared about what the service we were providing. So it really works. So it's just finding what works with your business and getting people to be excited about it.
I think whether you're using NPS, Google, FIFO, etc., it's about getting clients to recognize your service, and therefore you can start to use those scores to look at your service and look where it needs improvement and working from there. So I think a lot of clients are still using NPS. We still throw an NPS score out to some of our clients, and you look at where you can improve your service and how you can improve your service. But I think it's about looking at your culture and looking what that. So if you're driving that, and I think it's fine asking your clients for NPS, Google reviews, testimonials, etc. What I'm looking at is, can you drive your service so you get those unsolicited? And if those are unsolicited, that review is so much more powerful than a solicited review that they're going to probably say something great about because you've asked them to, and you only ask them because you've done something good for them, so you're going to get a good review. I want that naked review. I want that review that's come in because someone feels like they've had a brilliant service. And if you're not getting those type of reviews, then that's a whole different conversation. So the next question, what role does does intrinsic motivation, such as personal growth and alignment with values, play in overcoming the limitations of financial incentives?
I think I've probably answered that question before the question, because that's the bit for me that we were just talking about personal motivation, personal development. I think that's so important. With personal growth, if you've got the values of your company, you have your own values as well as a person. And I think where those two can be aligned, so the values that you hold as a person, you see reflected in the leaders in your business, and you are constantly growing and constantly seeking to develop, and your leader or your leadership team is also doing that, and they have enough interest in you as a person to want to see you develop. I think that is such a powerful force for both retention and also for attraction. Because this year, hopefully, there'll be much more growth in our recruitment sectors. We'll need to go and hire new people. And if you can articulate, I'm always a big fan of when you do an interview, let a couple of your staff also interview the person you're looking to bring on. And what they say is so important.
Yeah, I think that
consultants, not managers. So if you get a good consultant to talk about this is what it feels like to work here, and you are talking about personal motivation, personal development, and values, then I think you're onto a winner.
I think that understanding motivation at interview stage, when you bring people into your business, is absolutely key, and it's underestimated, and people don't maximize their opportunity at interview stage. I'd also say that intrinsic motivation is not fixed. It's a point in time. Someone today might say, my motivation is I want to spend more time at home. I want that balance, etc., etc. 6 months' time, they've written their car off and need to buy a new one. All of a sudden, financial motivation becomes really important. So it's not a one and done conversation. It's a continual conversation as a leader to understand your staff's motivations and pivot your incentives and rewards accordingly, I think.
So I'm going to come back to Mira's question. I hope you're well, Mira. And I'm going to come back to Graham's comment in a minute. And I'm going to answer the question that I've just asked. And I think personal growth at the moment is becoming as equally beneficial for people in companies as a financial reward. And I think what we've got to start to think is that, if money is a short-term motivator, could personal growth be the long-term motivator to keep people in businesses and therefore keep your attrition low? And I think looking at developing someone personally has a huge impact on that retention level. And I think it's the impact and the commitment the business has that has done a huge impact on the overall culture of the business, if you're looking after your people. And I think recruitment agencies were quite poor at that. We'll do a little bit of training here, a little bit of training there, but there's no long-term training. There's no things that say, can I do this? Can you do that, etc. So I think, the question is about then defining what personal growth is, and everyone's different, and therefore understanding people's true motivators, as you were saying there, Martin, because I was the same when I wanted to get the motivators out in the interview, and I would never take cash as a true motivator. I want to get what their true motivators were. And then I was going to look at how I can help them to achieve those motivators. How could I get that? And that then might warrant growth within the business. and help create culture. And I think that's a really strange sort of thought process, is that we don't really look at those long-term personal motivators that are outside finance that would help embed people into the business and keep them there longer. And I think it's those that grow your talent pool, skill pool within the business, okay, and help bring new people in. And I think they're the things that lots of companies in recruitment miss, because A, they think they're too expensive, and they're worried about, well, what if I put that person on that course and they leave? Well, what about if you don't put them on that course and they stay, as Richard Branson said, and do a worse job? So it's an interesting
one thing, Howard, as well, is don't assume that the individuals themselves understand their motivations.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of people we hire are youngsters, and they might say money because that's what they think they're supposed to say. But we used to run a training course that was an away 2-day event, and it was all about exploring why are you in this job. And if someone said money, it was okay, well, I'll give you money. What are you going to spend it on? Why are you buying that? And when you went under the surface, it was always a different motivation to the one they thought that they had.
Yeah. And that goes back to my first answer on the question, that I don't think money is the actual motivator for most people. Yes, there is a small percentage of people that it genuinely is a true motivator. But when you dig under most people, there's something else that's driving it. And we're programmed to say money from there. So, question from Mira. Thoughts on regular 360 feedback to support open conversations across all levels in the team?
100% supportive of 360-degree feedback. I think it's the one thing, no, it's one of the things that we don't do as well as we could do. Either we're afraid of the answer or we don't devote enough time to doing it. But there's nothing more powerful to the recipient to say, this is what I think of you, here's some feedback about how you've conducted yourself with this candidate, or how you did on a pitch, or how you are in the office, and the other way around. Yeah, I work for a company that insisted on feedback for all its staff, but it wasn't two-way. And then we had a consultant came in to give our leadership team some advice, and they picked up on it straight away. And quite a few of the leaders were somewhat afraid of the feedback that they would get, which is why they didn't do it. And we had a new CEO, which is why we changed things. So I think feedback is so important. Often, and it doesn't have to be very formal as well. It can be just, walking past the desk. It works particularly well if you have a culture where some of your work is from home and some of your work is in the office. Yeah, because I think that brings that culture together of, actually, we're giving constant feedback wherever you are. We don't just wait to do face to face.
So I'm going to jump in on that, Dave, because I always think this is the point, is that it's their review, not your review. And I think a lot of managers think it's you reviewing them, when actually I think it should be them reviewing their own personal month, but then they should be reviewing how you have helped them get to where they want to be. And that's the openness, that's the 360. And that's the thing a lot of managers fear, because they just review on figures rather than actually viewing on figures, behaviors, values, and everything else that goes with it. But it should be the consultant's review of their performance and of how you have helped them to perform or hindered them. And therefore, that feedback sometimes is hard to take. So I think 360 feedback is absolutely the way.
Well, I would encourage anybody to, when they do a proper 360 feedback session, they don't talk about numbers. They talk about the person. There's a place for numbers. Clearly, we want to run a business. Yeah. But actually, this is about you. This is about you as a person, how you are with your colleagues, how you are with your customers. The numbers are the numbers, whether you're 80%, 180% or 20%, we'll have a separate conversation about that.
And I ran 2 reviews. I ran a figures review and then a personal review, which is about them and their values, their behaviors and things like that.
And I think there's a fear that if you ask the question of your staff, you will create an answer you don't like. That answer already existed, whether you ask the question or not. You just know about it now. And the other thing I'd say is 360 feedback is absolutely essential. The worst thing you can do is ask for the feedback and then either not act on it or not explain why you're not going to act on it. You have to respond. You can't hear it and then do nothing with it, because that actually can lead to worse results.
So Graham, welcome, Graham. Graham's got put a comment in the thing that candidates or clients NPS, testimonials or similes is a good motivator. In the past, clients and candidates were more proactively saying thank you and there was a lot more bottles of wine and flowers being sent to the office, but it's much less more common now. So by proactively asking for these testimonials and celebrating them internally, it's a good for culture and it's good for motivation. And I think you're right. If you start to ask for it, you start to get that, and then you start to pick your skill levels up, and therefore hopefully you'll get that unsolicited one. Okay. So here's a question then. What do you believe are the most critical recruitment processes that need to be mastered for consistent growth? And why is consistency more important than creativity in these areas?
Well, when you say processes, Howard, in that question, are you thinking about the way we measure things? Are you thinking, like CVs to interview and all of that, or are you thinking of bigger?
So I'm going to be quite, it's the right word. I'm going to be quite belligerent with the answer here, Dave, and say it is what you think it is. Okay. But I'm going to give you my answer first to the question. So you can,
I was thinking, as this webinar went on, I was thinking, oh, back in the day, I would like to work for Howard. Now I'm thinking, no, I wouldn't. I don't want to work for Howard anymore. I don't want to get a seat.
So I think there are three processes that people need to be absolutely consistent with. First is business development. The second is building candidate pools. And the third is mastering your tech. And that will help create more time for your consultant and help your consultant to become more consistent. Because if you go into any business, every business that I go into that's either good business, poor business, etc., it's the inconsistencies that are letting the business down. So I want business development to be done every day. I want building candidate pools every day. And I want people to master their tech every single day, because that helps them to move forward. Okay. So you've got to start to think that if a client calls, have you got a candidate at your fingertip? If you've not, you're the same as every other recruitment agency. You're going out looking for them. If you're not doing consistent business development, you get the yo-yo results, which what happens? Do a lot of business development, get a lot of jobs on, stop doing business development, fill the jobs, and then all of a sudden you've got no jobs. So your revenue yo-yos and you get inconsistent growth. What helps you create consistency is using your tech properly. And therefore, what you start to do is create a better habit. And once those habits become consistent, you get consistent growth. So I think, to me, it's business development, building candidate pools every day, and mastering your tech to enable people to do that better.
And to add to that, Howard, it's about how you use those processes as well.
Yeah.
So I've been in companies where they absolutely celebrate every job they get. Yeah. But actually, it may not be a job worth working on.
Correct.
Because actually, if you look at it, the client may take 60 days to pay, not 30. The margin may be 15% or 13%, not 15, or whatever you have in your process. So work on jobs that make a difference to your company or to your client, and have a way in your processes of analyzing that, so you know you're working on things that will bring success for you as a consultant, but also for your business. I was with an organization that was working on a lower margin account because they didn't want to lose it. When we analyzed how much money they made from the account, they didn't actually make any money from it. It was worth losing. So they needed a better approach to business development because they needed to get better clients, but they also needed to analyze as part of the process, actually, is this something we want to stay with? And that's going to be quite tight for us because we've got more costs coming in. We've got a margin challenge coming in. So, to your point about, are we niche? Do we have the right candidates? I think that's so important. That's one of the most important things now. But then if we have got niche candidates, we've got hard to find candidates, are we supplying them to PSLs at 8-9%?
So it's measuring what success looks like. Like you guys with a client last week, and they have taken their client numbers down from 49 to 35.
Yeah.
But increased their placement ratios from 3 out of 10 to 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Doubled their turnover. It's not rocket science. They've stopped working with poor clients. They've stopped working with clients that don't respect them. They've stopped working with clients that aren't worth working with. And they've been able to focus on their top 3 billing clients have changed every year.
Good.
And your point of the question there, which is, why is consistency more important than creativity? we talked about the processes that consultants go through. I think that applies to the processes that the leadership in a business goes through. You have to be consistent in your belief. If your goal is we will stop working with poor clients, as a leader, you have to consistently apply that, and it might be painful at times. And then also when you're monitoring the processes your consultants are using, be consistent with how you're measuring it and your reaction to good and poor performance. I think surprises and shocks are the things that really confuse and disrupt consultants. They should know that you're going to ask them on a Monday morning, what are they going to achieve in that week? And your reaction to their response will be the same each week, whether it's good or bad. You will be calm, measured, and kind of consistent with your reaction as a leader.
Yeah. And just to specify that comment, I was talking to a client there that has 20 plus staff in when we're talking double their turnover. So it's not a one person business or a solo business. It's a really large size recruitment agency. So it's the bigger one from there. So here's a different type. Let's put it in this way. Can you then share real world examples where focusing on consistent execution in the recruitment process has directly led to measurable growth outcomes?
Well, a little bit like what you just said, Howard, with a client last year, we got them to analyse the time of requirement to cash. So to cash in, and we got the FD or financial controller involved, because they were finding that some of their best clients were taking significantly longer to pay than some of their nominally worse clients, where they actually made more money. And the financial controller, as part of the process, took it upon himself to educate all of the sales staff, and I'm saying all, they had 14 staff, yes, it's not a big company, about this is what it takes to collect cash. And they had the lady who did the cash collection as well, debt chasing, involved as well. And it opened up the eyes of the consultants. Now, of course, they were excited when they got a new job, but they had a process to recognize that actually, a margin of, pick a number, 15% getting paid on 90 days is not as good as a margin of 13% getting paid on 7. And so those sort of processes, I think every business, whether you've got 2 or 3 people or whether you've got 300 people, you can have those processes in place. But the point was they stopped to analyze what it was, where they were getting their money from and where they weren't.
And I approached that question slightly differently, actually, in that when I was starting out as a sales consultant, we had a manager who was obsessed with process. So your bit about consistent execution of process, that really, I kind of almost had a cold sweat thinking, I remember this bloke, and he used to sit in front of us and he used to teach us when to make phone calls to candidates, the minimum questions you should answer, your opening pitch to a client, how many calls you make per day. And it was robotic, and to the point where one of the team in the training group I was in said to him, "You're going to turn us all into robots and we're all going to be the same." And he said, "Yes." And we were all a bit gobsmacked. And the example he gave was, he said, if you're a Formula One racing driver, you have to learn how to drive at some point in your life. And when you learn to drive, you're looking down at your feet, thinking, where do I put the pedals? You're looking at the gear stick, thinking, where do I put it? And you're obsessed with that, and you can't drive properly. Only until you master that and it becomes robotic can you then look up and look at the road and where you're going. And then you start bringing your personality to the driving. How do I take that corner? How do I do this? What speed should I be going at? When do I overtake? So his lesson was the process should be robotic to enable you to stop thinking about it, and you apply your energy, your effort, and your talent to elevating conversations, to seeing opportunities where others don't because they're looking at their feet and looking at the gear stick. So that bit about consistent application of process isn't to stop you and stifle your creativity, it's to unleash it. And that's the lesson that you should be teaching your consultants.
It's interesting because I think all of this sort of comes to the same thing. So I remember working with a business when I first started coaching and mentoring. Business about 25 heads in the business. Their performance was okay. They were growing slowly, but weren't growing massively. And what they were doing, they were getting their admin team to take references on all the placements, and they were collecting references. Didn't have to, because it wasn't part of the compliance that they needed. But they were only about 60%, I think they were at the time, references getting back. So it wasn't good. And the references they were getting were normally from clients they'd already done business with. So it wasn't really working. So we put an incentive for the half the year for them to get to 90% compliant on their references. We put an incentive into the sales team to hit a certain target based on new clients coming into the business. And it was really interesting what habit changed. The habits that changed was that the people started to go out and ask for more incentives, because the people in the admin team realized that they were going to win the big prize, because we put a big prize in, and the admin team and the sales team would all get it. If we hit it, it was one in, or one out, all out from there. But what the sales team started to realize is, if we want to get more new business, if we start to take references from all the CVs that we put across to people, not just the ones that we place, then we triple the amount of references that we get. And so they started to do that. And they started to then work with the admin people to help them bring more references to them, because they were the leads. So they were taking the references and taking the leads, and by default was doing more business sales. After 6 months, it became habit. It been ingrained. And they grew for the next 2 years around about 20% compound growth year on year, every year, purely because they were bringing new businesses into there, purely from a simple thing of just taking a reference, but actually making that reference and to them to understand that that reference, just as a reference, it's a business call, it's a sales call, and that's where they start to convert. So I think there's loads of things that we can do that, if they become habit and become consistent and are executed well, it will create growth. So how do you integrate then the 3 Ps, purpose, planning, and process, into your team's daily operations to foster ongoing energy, engagement, but more importantly, accountability?
Well, it's the one thing I would say as an overarching is measure what matters. So Howard, you spoke earlier about the 3 processes: business development, candidate production, if you like, and mastering tech. I'm very conscious with recruitment leaders, there are so many things to measure. There's systems to measure, there's performance to measure, there's, so actually, I think I would answer this question by saying, decide on what the key things are, and if they were purpose, planning, and process, and measure just those. As recruiters, and maybe I'm going against the grain here, we need to measure less and focus on help people more. I've had 3 conversations since Christmas with companies that are measuring so many things. And when I ask them what they're doing with that data, the answer is normally, well, it goes into our board report, or the chief exec wants it, or whatever, but actually isn't driving the business. So if you decide that the 3 things that are going to drive your business in 2025 are purpose, and how do people get engaged with the purpose, to Martin's point earlier on, planning, by planning, do you mean that the business development and planning for growth, and then processes, then use those as the drivers in your feedback, in your one-to-one meetings that you have, in your sales presentations, in the way that you run your business with your staff. Then just decide on that, but pick the ones that matter to your business, that will drive performance, and then measure those, but don't measure everything.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'd also say, with purpose in particular, try and understand the individual's purpose and link that to the processes as well, so that they can see that they're going to achieve their goals as well as the company goals. And then you're right, Dave. I think keep it simple, keep it visible, so that people can see that as a business we're moving forwards and they feel part of it. So these sorts of KPIs and the processes shouldn't just be a top-down sort of push that we have to do this because. And I liked your example, Howard, of the incentive that was put in place for references. If you think it's important to your business, reward the staff if they achieve it, and that reward can be whatever you want it to be. But link success and celebration with achieving these metrics.
So I think we've got to connect the business purpose to everyone's individual purpose. And everyone's individual purpose will be different, but therefore planning and making sure your process is consistent starts to create the energy that you want. And the accountability side there is, Dave, is what you measure. And I think you're right, lots of people measure lots of things, and they should carry on measuring those things. But as you said, only have 3 defined measures that they take to their consultants, so they can work with that with their consultants rather than, taking everything and looking at that. And I think rather than measure, and we've said this on so many of these webinars, it's untrue, we need to stop that daily measure and just having our eyes down, looking at our feet of what we've done today. We need to have a measure of consistency and therefore look at trends over a longer period of time. Is that trend going up, going down? What's happening to that trend? So you can address the trend rather than berate somebody for a poor performance today and then praise them for an excellent performance tomorrow, because all of a sudden that becomes just a poor way of managing people. It's not a way of motivating people, because they're worried every single day when they come in, whether they're going to get berated or whether they get praised. And a lot of the things that people are measuring, they're not in the control of the consultant. They're not in control of the person, such as how many calls are you going to make today? Well, if no one picks up the call at the other end, you could make 1,000 calls in a day. Doesn't make any business, but you're going to get appreciated for that. But if you make one call in that day and that call leads to a load of business, you're going to get berated because you've only made one call. So what is it that you're actually measuring? Make sure it's actually leading to business, and it's the accountability side that's really important. So like you, Dave, I think have 3 measures maximum, but measure everything. So when things are failing, you can go back and start to look at where it is and what's going and what has an impact on your business. And that's where your board report should actually be working, looking at those different things. Yeah. So a really interesting conversation today. Lots of challenges, lots of different viewpoints, which is good. Some good interaction from the thing. So thank you very much for attending, everybody. Next week, we've got a whole new set of webinars starting. We are still building our podcasts at the moment. So they will be starting hopefully either latest March, earliest mid-Feb, if we can get them done and dusted and all worked out. But if not, they'll be certainly out at the beginning of March. But ladies and gents, thanks for your time. Martin, Dave, thanks for your time. Ladies and gents, it's been a great week. Look forward to seeing you all next weekend.
Have a good week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Guys.